The cake was sitting on the counter when they arrived. I had made it myself, a lemon pound cake with cream cheese frosting, the kind my mother used to make for every birthday in our family going back as far as I can remember. I had gotten up at 6 that morning to bake it, not because anyone asked me to, because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. My daughter Vanessa and her husband Craig pulled into the driveway just before noon. I watched them from the kitchen window, the way I always do, the way a mother watches, looking for something in the way they walk, the way they hold themselves, something that tells you how the visit is going to go before anyone opens their mouth. Craig got out first. He was wearing a golf shirt, very clean, very pressed. He looked around the yard the way he always does, like he is assessing property. Vanessa came around the passenger side with a tote bag over one shoulder and her phone already in her hand. I had turned 68 that morning. I did not need a party. I did not ask for one. What I wanted was simple. My daughter, a meal together, a quiet afternoon. That is the whole of it. I had set the dining table the night before. I pressed the good tablecloth, the ivory one I have had since before Vanessa was born. I put out the blue dishes, the ones that were her grandmother's. I made her favorite baked chicken, collard greens, cornbread, sweet potato casserole. I had been cooking since Thursday afternoon. They came inside and Craig set his keys on the entryway table without saying anything, the way a person sets keys down in their own house. Vanessa hugged me with one arm, her phone still in her other hand. "The house smells good," she said. "I cooked," I said. She nodded and went to put her bag in the guest room. We ate lunch together and it was fine. Craig talked about his job, about some deal he was working on, something to do with commercial real estate. I listened the way I have trained myself to listen, attentive but not too present, because whenever I ask questions he seems irritated, like my curiosity is an interruption. Vanessa talked about their neighborhood, about a renovation they were thinking about doing on the back of the house. I asked how much that might cost, and she said they hadn't gotten estimates yet, but it would probably be significant. I did not ask anything further. After lunch, Craig went to sit in the living room and turned on the television. Vanessa helped me clear the table, which she does maybe half the time, and we stood in the kitchen for a little while, the two of us talking about nothing in particular. It felt almost like it used to feel, before everything became so careful between us. Before every conversation started to feel like I was walking across a floor I couldn't fully trust. She left the kitchen to make a phone call. I started wrapping up the leftovers. That is when I noticed Craig's laptop bag sitting open on the chair by the door. I was not snooping. I want to be very clear about that because it matters to me. I was walking past to get to the coat closet and the bag had fallen slightly sideways and a folder had slipped halfway out. A paper folder, the kind with the metal clasp at the top. And on the tab, in Craig's handwriting, were 2 words. My name. I stood there for a moment. I am a retired accounts manager. I spent 31 years in financial administration for a hospital system in Georgia. I know what folders with people's names on them look like, and I know what they mean. I picked it up. Inside was a printed document, several pages, with a letterhead from a law firm I did not recognize. The words at the top of the first page were ones I had seen before in my professional life, but never in a context like this. Never in a context like this. Never in a context that included my own name. It was a power of attorney inquiry packet. Not just any POA, a financial power of attorney, the kind that, if signed, would give another person legal authority over my bank accounts, my investment accounts, my real estate decisions. The kind that can be structured to activate not upon incapacity, as it sometimes legitimately is, but upon a broad definition of diminished capacity that a cooperative doctor might certify without much difficulty. There was a sticky note on the inside cover in Vanessa's handwriting. It said, "Talk to her this weekend. CR says before the summer is better. CR, Craig." I put the folder back exactly as I had found it. I straightened the bag so it sat the same way it had before. I walked back to the kitchen and stood at the sink and turned on the water and let it run over my hands. Not because they needed washing, but because I needed something to do with my body while my mind worked. I am not a woman who panics. I was not raised that way and I have not lived that way. I have buried a husband. I have raised a child alone for 11 years after he passed. I have managed multi-million-dollar budget reconciliations under pressure, and I have sat across from hospital administrators who wanted to bully me, and I have not flinched. I am 68 years old, and I have earned my steadiness. But I will tell you what I felt standing at that sink. I felt something move through me that I do not have a clean word for. It was not anger, not yet. It was more like the feeling of a floor dropping, the sudden awareness that what you thought was solid was not solid, had not been solid for a while, and you had simply not noticed. I thought about the last 2 years. I thought about how Craig had started asking questions about my finances. Casually at first, the way he does everything, worked into conversation like it was nothing. He had asked once about my pension, what my monthly income looked like since retiring. He had asked about the house, whether I had thought about downsizing. He had mentioned more than once that managing finances gets harder as you get older, that it was smart to have structures in place. I had taken all of that at face value because she is my daughter, because I loved her and I thought she loved me, and because I did not want to believe that the two of them were sitting in their house in Florida making plans that involved my name on a legal document without my knowledge. Vanessa came back into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water. She leaned against the counter the way she has done since she was a teenager, her weight on one hip, and she looked at me with an expression I had seen 100 times, careful, measuring, deciding whether now was the right moment. "Mama," she said, "can we talk about something?" "Sure," I said. My voice was even. "I am proud of that." "Craig and I have been thinking," she said, "about you, about making sure you're taken care of, going forward." "I appreciate that," I said. "We were thinking it might make sense," she said, "to have some things set up legally, just so that if anything ever happened, not that it would, but if you ever needed help with decisions, with finances, that kind of thing, we could be there." She was looking at me with concern on her face. Real concern, maybe. I am not sure anymore where her feelings end and Craig's influence begins. I have asked myself that question more times than I can count. "What kind of things?" I said. "Just a power of attorney setup," she said. "Nothing dramatic. Just in case." I looked at my daughter. I looked at her for a long moment. She's 53 years old. She has her father's eyes and my mother's cheekbones, and she was the child I read to every night for years, and the child I drove to piano lessons, and the child I worked double shifts to send to college. "Let me think about it," I said. She looked relieved. She nodded and said that was fine. There was no rush, and she refilled her water glass and went to sit with Craig. I cut the pound cake. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and my iPad, and I did what I should have done a long time ago. I opened my email. I went into a folder I almost never look at, the one where my bank's automated notifications go, the receipts and the alerts and the account updates. I scrolled back 2 months. There was an email I had not opened. It was from the Fraud and Inquiry Department at my bank. It had been flagged and rerouted to that folder by a filter I had set up years ago for bank communications, and I had never thought to check it because I assumed everything important would come through my main inbox. The email said that a request had been made to add an authorized user to my primary checking account. The request had been submitted online. The name on the request was Craig's. The request had been denied because it did not follow the proper procedure. It required my in-person authorization at a branch. But the fact of the request was there. The date on it was 6 weeks ago. I sat with that for a long time. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in my bed in the dark and I listened to the house, the settling sounds old houses make, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind against the eaves. I thought about my husband who built the shelves in this bedroom with his own hands. I thought about my mother, who told me once that the most dangerous thing a woman can do is let someone else believe they have a claim on what she has built. I thought about my daughter down the hall. I thought, how long has this been in motion? I got up at 5:30. I dressed. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a list, neat, organized, the way I have organized my professional life for 30 years. At 8 o'clock, I called my attorney. Her name is Sylvia, and she has handled my estate documents since my husband passed. I told her I needed an urgent appointment. She heard something in my voice, and she said she could see me at 10. I left before Vanessa and Craig woke up. I left a note on the counter that said I had a morning errand and there was coffee in the pot. Sylvia's office is on the 4th floor of a building downtown with windows that look out over the city, and she listened to everything I said without interrupting. She is that kind of attorney. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Lorraine, what do you want the outcome to be?" I had thought about that on the drive over. I had thought about it very carefully. "I want everything protected," I said. "I want the documents structured so that no one can do what they are planning to do, and I want it done before I go back home today." She nodded. We spent 3 hours in that office. We went through my existing documents, my will, my healthcare directive, my existing durable power of attorney, which I had assigned to a cousin of mine named Patricia years ago and had never updated. We updated it. We changed the financial POA assignment to Sylvia's firm as a professional fiduciary. We added specific language limiting any future attempts to modify my account access without a 3-step verification process that required my direct presence. We reviewed the deed to my house. We reviewed my brokerage accounts. By 1 o'clock it was done. Notarized, filed, backed up in Sylvia's secure system. On the way home, I stopped at my bank. I spoke with a branch manager I know personally from years of doing business there. I told him what had happened with the unauthorized request. He pulled up the record. He confirmed it. He flagged the account with an additional security protocol that required my in-person presence and a secondary verification code for any changes to account access. No exceptions, no on-mine overrides. Then I went home. Craig's car was still in the driveway. I could hear the television when I came through the door. Vanessa was in the kitchen making a sandwich. She looked up and asked where I'd been, and I said I had taken care of a few things. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Everything is exactly right," I said. We spent the afternoon together. We watched a movie. Craig fell asleep on the couch. Vanessa and I sat on the back porch for a while in the late afternoon, the way we used to do when she was young, and she talked about her life and I listened. She talked about how stressed Craig had been with work, how much pressure he was under, how they had been worried about money lately. She said it carefully, not quite looking at me, and I understood that this was the other part of the picture, the reason behind the folder, the reason behind the request to the bank. They were in trouble. And instead of telling me that, instead of coming to me as family, they had decided to position themselves to take. I did not say any of that. I sat and I listened, and I let her talk. That evening, they left to drive back to the airport. Vanessa hugged me at the door, a real hug this time, both arms, and I held her for a moment, and I thought about all the years behind us, all the ordinary days that make up a life together. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," I said. And I meant it. That was never the complicated part. I watched the car back out of the driveway. I stood on the porch until they turned the corner, and I could not see them anymore. Then I went inside. I washed the blue dishes by hand, the way I always do. I put them back in the cabinet where they belong. I put the leftover sweet potato casserole in a container and put it in the refrigerator. I turned off the kitchen light. I sat down at the table and I opened my laptop and I pulled up my accounts, all of them, one by one, the way I used to do at the end of a work day, methodical, thorough. Everything was exactly as it should be. Everything was protected. Everything was mine. A few weeks later, Vanessa called on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the garden, which I have taken up since retiring and which I love more than I expected to. She asked how I was doing, and I told her I was well. We talked for a few minutes about ordinary things. Then she said, a little carefully, "Mama, Craig was asking, have you had a chance to think any more about what we talked about, the paperwork?" I set down the hand trowel I was holding. "I have taken care of my paperwork," I said. Everything is in order. I have a professional fiduciary through my attorney's firm, and my accounts have additional security protocols in place. I want you to know that because I think it is important that we are honest with each other." There was a silence on the line. "Oh," she said. "I also know about the request that was submitted to my bank 6 weeks ago," I said. Another silence. Longer. "Vanessa," I said, "I love you. I have loved you since before you took your first breath, and that will never change. But I need you to understand something. Everything I have, this house, my savings, my pension, every single thing, I built it. Your father and I built it together, and then I continued building it after he was gone. It is not a resource. It is not a safety net for decisions you and Craig make. It is mine. And I have made sure in every legal way available to me that it will remain mine for as long as I am on this earth." I could hear her breathing. "I'm not asking you to stop being my daughter," I said. "I'm asking you to be an honest one." She was quiet for a long time. And then, very quietly, she said, "I'm sorry, Mama. I don't know yet what that sorry means. I don't know how much of it belongs to her and how much of it will dissolve the next time Craig starts talking. I am 68 years old, and I have learned that love and accountability are not the same thing, and that you can hold both at once without losing yourself." I went back to my garden. The tomatoes I planted in April were just starting to come in. I knelt down in the dirt in the afternoon light, and I worked with my hands, and the day was very quiet, and it was mine. I have thought about this a lot since that birthday weekend. Not obsessively, not with bitterness, just the way you turn something over in your hands when you are trying to understand the full shape of it. What Craig and Vanessa set in motion did not begin the weekend they drove up to Georgia. It began years earlier in small things I chose not to examine too closely. The casual questions about my pension, the comments about the house being too large for one person, the slow, patient construction of a narrative in which I was someone who needed to be managed. People do not arrive at that kind of plan overnight. It builds in the spaces where honesty should have been and wasn't. That is the part I sit with. Not what they tried to do, but what I allowed to go unaddressed for so long because I did not want to see it. I love my daughter, and I confuse that love with trust. And those are not the same thing. Love is something you give. Trust is something that has to be earned and maintained. When I stopped requiring Vanessa to maintain it, I made it easier for her to stop trying. I am not saying this to be hard on myself. I am saying it because I think it is true, and I have spent 68 years learning that the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, is the only thing worth standing on. What I did that morning, calling Sylvia, sitting in that office, going to the bank, that was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. It was not even anger, not really. It was clarity. It was 68 years of building a life finally being put to use in the most direct way possible. All those years of discipline, of showing up to work when I did not feel like it, of managing other people's complicated financial situations with care and precision, all of it came back to me in that moment and said, "You know exactly what to do, so do it." That is what I want anyone watching this to hold on to. The things you build in yourself, the steadiness, the knowledge, the discipline, they do not only serve you in the obvious moments, they serve you in the moments you never saw coming. Lorraine, the retired accounts manager, walked into that attorney's office and handled what Lorraine, the mother, could not have handled alone. And Vanessa. I have not stopped loving her. I said that at the end, and I meant it completely. But love without accountability is just sentiment. It does not protect either person. When I told her what I knew, when I laid it out plainly and gave her the chance to be honest, I was not punishing her. I was offering her something I should have offered years earlier, the expectation that she was capable of better. That is what you do for someone you actually love. The garden is doing well. The tomatoes came in better than I expected. I work out there in the mornings when the light is still low and the air has that particular coolness to it that does not last past 8 o'clock. I am not waiting for anything. I am not afraid. I am 68 years old and everything I have is exactly where I put it, and the life I built is still fully and entirely mine.